How y'all doing? Good. Excellent. Glad to hear it. We are here to talk about what you've been missing in SSMS. I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Okay, thank you. There's plenty of seats over in the corner, so as you come in, please just go all the way over to those empty seats. Don't get stuck in the doorway. I'm Skwiers-Koballa. I am a PM at Microsoft on the SQL team. I work on the tools team with Aaron. Been at Microsoft for a couple of years now. I generally get very excited about developer tools and DevOps, but like just about everyone on the planet, I've used SSMS quite a bit, and I work with Erin on all the improvements that she brings to SSMS. So I got to join you.
Yes, and thank you for being here. Erin Salato, I'm a program manager at Microsoft as well. I've been there for a couple years, and since I've started, part of my charter has been Management Studio. So I'm assuming you're here because you use Management Studio, yes? Okay, how many of you have things that you don't like about Management Studio? Okay, we'll get to that. I was thinking about this last night. How many of you know what a program manager does for Microsoft? Like, how many think you could really describe it? I'm not gonna ask you to, but like, raise your hand if you think you could really describe it. Okay, let me tell you what we do. Or let me tell you what we do with regard to tools in a very concise way. To the engineers, we're the voice of the customer. We're the voice of you. So when we're asking for feedback, I truly do want to understand your constructive feedback for sure. And to you, we are often the voice of the engineer. So when we're talking about what's coming, what's not coming, there's definitely some validity understanding behind that sometimes we're able to share openly, sometimes not quite as openly. So we're doing, I think, as much as we can while we're up here to be as transparent as possible with what we're able to share.
I am not a poker player.
Well, neither one of us are very good poker players. So if I go like this, no, I'm just kidding. I'm totally kidding. Okay, I'm putting the feedback up here. We'll put that up again at the end. And I have the abstract just to make sure that you're all in the right place. You want to talk about Management Studio, right? Okay, so this session came about. Has anybody ever been to a session specific to Management Studio before? One, two, a couple of you. I never have been. And every time we would do a presentation specific to tools, somebody would be like, why don't you do a session on SSMS? And my thought was, SSMS has been around for 19 years, right? It can vote. And I tend to think that people know everything, but I got a lot of feedback that, oh no, there's a lot of stuff we don't know. Hence, this session here.
So just a few moments ago, we kind of asked who uses SSMS or who has used SSMS. There might have been like 2 very shy people who did not raise their hand. And one of the reasons why you might not actively be using SSMS quite as much is because you're on a Mac. Now, we do have other tools. Yep, mine's in my backpack. We do have other tools that run directly on Linux and Macs, like Azure Data Studio, like the extension in VS Code. However, there is functionality in SSMS that is not in those tools, and there's a lot of functionality in SSMS that's not going to come to those tools anytime soon. Like, I just frankly have no plans. So you sometimes need to run SSMS on a Mac. How do you work that? So I wanted to just step through real quickly what it would look like if you want to have a development environment on your Mac and then use SSMS with it. It's straightforward but nuanced. You would run Docker on your Mac and then use a SQL Server container if you want to do that local development environment. If you don't need a local SQL Server, you skip that part entirely. You run Windows and a VM on your Mac. The examples that I have here are based on using Parallels, but you can use UTM or other virtualization applications for your Mac. You install SSMS inside that VM. Getting a little nuanced here, if you're using an ARM, like an M1, M2, M3 Mac, your Windows VM is going to be the ARM64 VM. SSMS will then use the Windows emulator side to run inside the VM. So you still want to install that ARM64 Windows VM. When you launch SSMS, you usually need that server connection string. You don't use localhost. I know that the server is local on that same physical machine, but it is not localhost. When you run that VM, you get a special virtual network inside your machine. So the example, network architecture is not my forte, but the example on the screen is what it looks like if you're using VMware. Your Windows VM, the default address space is that 10.211 address space. And so if you did something like use terminal to run ipconfig, you would find out what's the IP of my Windows host, because you're looking to find out what does the Mac host look like to that Windows VM. So I'll pop open terminal, PowerShell, that kind of thing on my Windows VM, get my IP. I might do something like fancy like ipconfig. Here, the IPv4 address is 55.3. My gateway is 55.1. So the SQL Server is either at 55.1 on the gateway or 55.2, an extra one in the middle. You can experiment real quick with those two options when you connect from SSMS. Eagle-eyed people are going to be like, that's the old connection dialog. How dare you be that far off base from yesterday's release? But that, in short, is how you would set up your local development environment and use SSMS on your Mac. So now everyone can raise their hands about using SSMS. That's all I've got, Aaron.
Perfect. Perfect. Okay. I need to open up something really, really quick. And can you all hear okay? I feel like, yeah, we're really low, aren't we? I don't want to go into my mom voice because I got some time without my kids while I'm here. So is it possible to up the volume just a little bit so that folks can hear? Is that better? I can still keep talking. I'm just going to ramble. I've got some head shaking that are like, no, we really still can't hear that. So if we can possibly up it a little bit more back there, or yeah, you're upping it more, or how are we doing in terms of the sound? Can those of you that are in the back, you still can't hear, you're shaking. So I know you can hear me to some degree, but you can't hear me clearly, right? Like if I talk like this, then you can absolutely hear me. But I really don't want to talk like this the entire time if it's... What's that?
SQL team will tell us to turn down in a minute due to the stage just being there.
They will. Okay, so I have to use the loud voice? Okay. If we get told to turn down, I'm sorry, but in the back you can, is this better? Right where I am? Okay, thanks for the thumbs up, I appreciate that. So SSMS 20, as Drew mentioned, was released actually Tuesday. I know Assad said yesterday, this morning, Assad's got a lot going on, so does Drew. But we released on Tuesday, which was the day that I arrived here, so it was a lot of fun, let me tell you, to get that out the door. But the team did a fantastic job. So we introduced some connection changes in this. Has anybody in here downloaded SSMS 20 and taken a look at it? A few of you, excellent. I love my early adopters. That's lovely to see. So we introduced connection changes, and this was a very tightly scoped set of changes for SSMS 20. In SQL Server 2022, we introduced support for TDS 8.0 and strict encryption, and we needed to bring that into SSMS, which we did by updating a couple of one of the dependencies. And this means that we introduced a change in the default behavior within the connection dialog. We've tried to be very proactive about these changes because for a lot of you who are very familiar with SQL, this isn't going to be a big deal. But for some of your users who are seeing this different dialogue and maybe having different options, it might be a little bit confusing. But this does bring improved security within SSMS. So we updated one of the dependencies, which is Microsoft Data SQL Client, as well as a few others like SMO and DAC effects. So there's a couple of things that you'll notice when you go to start up SSMS 20 for the first time. The first is that you'll get asked if you want to import your settings from SSMS 18 or 19. And there's a lot of confusion sometimes about SSMS settings. Do a lot of folks customize your view within SSMS, like maybe you change some fonts or colors or things like that? Okay, so when you initially get asked to import your settings, you're thinking, oh, they're all gonna come in, this is great. And the challenge is that we actually have two sets of settings within SSMS. As a reminder for those who don't know, SSMS is based on the Visual Studio shell. So the great thing is that we pick up some things from Visual Studio. The sometimes not so great thing is that we're not always immediately tightly coupled with Visual Studio. So there's SSMS specific settings, which we tend to call user settings. And then there's Visual Studio settings, which we tend to say VS Shell settings. So when you get prompted to import your settings within SSMS 20 when you're upgrading, we're bringing in the SSMS specific settings, which is really the most recently used list within your connection dialog, which I definitely recommend that you import. If you want to bring in the other settings, like your fonts and colors and all of that, then you need to go and export. You have to specifically take this action. You have to export them from SSMS 18 or 19, and then you have to import them back in. So that's available through the tools, import and export settings. So for folks who want to bring those over, who don't want to go through the steps of recreating everything, that's what you need to do to bring that in. Now, in terms of, I don't know why that's, hold on. Why is it hiding? Why is it not hiding? Like, I don't know what we did, but there. Okay, thank you. Okay, connection dialog changes. We have SSMS 19 on the left, SSMS 20 on the right. You'll notice that on the right, we have a new section called connection security. This is, some of these were on the connection properties tab. So you've got encryption and you've got trust server certificate, which is a tricky little thing for some folks who end up getting an error message and they have to select it. Those used to be on connection properties. We brought those to the front. We also have hostname and certificate, which is new. Now, where this becomes a breaking change is related to the value that gets selected for encryption right here. In SSMS 20 and before, the value was optional. In SSMS 20, moving forward, the default value will be mandatory. So if you've imported your settings as part of your installation of SSMS 20, then whatever you had there before will come over. But then when you go to set up, connect to a new database, a new instance, the default here will be different than what it has been before. So that's what we really want to make sure folks are aware of. And whether or not you use mandatory or strict encryption, which is a new option, the dropdown, that's going to depend upon your SQL Server configuration. I'm going to pause and see what questions we have about SSMS 20, if any. Anything online? We've got folks online as well, thanks to those of you who are tuning in. We're good to go.
So if encryption is mandatory, and it was optional before, now we're basically defaulting to the connection's going to have encryption, right?
Correct.
So
we're defaulting to a more secure scenario.
Yeah.
Right. So when I go ahead and I say connect, right, by default, here's what we'll have, which is better in terms of security, although I know that some folks tend to look at this as kind of extra step problematic. Was there anything else you wanted to add? Okay, perfect. I've got 2 blog posts. I wrote 3 blog posts, part 1, part 2, part 3, related to SSMS 20. One really dives into the changes for the connection and is kind of more high level. The second one, connection dialog, is a little bit of a deeper, more technical dive. And then we also created a new page on connecting with Management Studio to help folks with these changes. So in terms of the what you've been missing in SSMS, which was the whole title of this session, the idea here was let's go through some things that we use a lot or other folks use a lot that not everybody might know about. Now, it's entirely possible that everything that we cover, you already know. But I'm hoping you learned something new. SSMS is a product that is very wide and it is very deep. Again, after 19 years of development, there's a lot of stuff in there that not everybody's aware of. I'll admit there's something that that I learn on a regular basis. So with regard to installation and startup, first of all, you can install SSMS without Azure Data Studio. And this is for 19.3 and below, because in SSMS 20, we removed Azure Data Studio from the installer. So we had a lot of feedback about folks who did not love that, and so we took that out. But if you're running an earlier build when you install, you can just install with this command line, and it won't install that. You can control what opens at startup. So if you notice, when I started up Management Studio, it tried to connect to Object Explorer. If that's not what you want, you have the ability to select something else. So you could, boy, my drawing's terrible today. You could open a new query window. You could open Object Explorer and a new query window. You could just open an entirely empty environment, depending upon what you tend to do. I tend to hop immediately into Object Explorer and then do Control-N for a new query window. I don't have to do that anymore. I can select the appropriate option. And then we also have registered servers. How many folks are aware of the registered servers options? Oh, look at all of those folks. Okay, so registered servers. This is actually something that I never used, but I know based on the feedback that it's quite popular. So if we go into View, we have this option right here of registered servers. So when I select that, it's going to bring up a new window entirely. And within my engine, I've got local server groups, things that I might connect to, and then I have my central management server. So my central management server is actually a whole, it can be a different server that stores information about different servers that I connect to within my environment. And then one of the things that you have the ability to do when you've got registered servers in place is that you can run a query across multiple servers at one time. And I see some heads nodding as, yes, that's something that we like to do. Don't worry, we're not taking that away. We know that that's important functionality for a lot of folks, that registered servers bring a lot of value to a lot of folks as well. But if you're not using them, the few of you that might not be, there you go. The toolbar. And I tried to group these in the order of how we would go through Management Studio. Presenter mode. This is something that I also never use, but let me show you how to use it. For those of you, not just in the scenario where you're presenting, but sometimes you need to have things that are of a larger font. So if I open up the query editor and I start to type just whatever here, my font is pretty reasonably sized because I tend to leave it that way all the time. But I can come up here to the search and I can say present on, and it makes everything just a little bit bigger so that if you're doing demos or maybe somebody comes over to your desk and you show them something and you don't want them leaning right over your shoulder and looking right so close to you and you need your personal space, you can turn on presenter mode. And then when you're done, you're just gonna go right back up here and just say present off, and it will go back down. Okay, so really easy to hop back and forth between those two. The other thing from the toolbar that I really like is the output window. So the output window allows us to see additional information about what's going on behind the scenes within SSMS. This is really useful for exploration, for understanding. It can also be very valuable in terms of troubleshooting. So within tools and options, you have an output window, and you can select the different channels that are available. So Object Explorer and telemetry are selected by default. These bottom three are newer ones that we've added in more recent releases. So if you don't see them in your version of SSMS, I definitely want to upgrade. But what happens when you do this is if I go into View and I say Output, it brings this bottom window. And I'm going to drop this down, and I'm going to switch it to the Object Explorer, and I'm going to clear out what I have in there with just this clear all. And then you'll notice if I go over to Object Explorer and I expand a database, down here I can start to see what queries it's running. So this is what's running behind the scenes. Sometimes you might fire up extended events. Those of you that love Profiler might fire up that to see what's running. For Object Explorer, you can see that within this window. And again, sometimes when you're troubleshooting, the SQL client especially can be very useful output. to take a look at. And if you want to know what telemetry we're collecting, you can see that as well. I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions so far. Yes. Can we have the mic on for Vice?
Yeah, so there are a couple of online questions.
Sure.
The first one, is it planned to do an in-place upgrade from one major version to another, or do I have to deinstall the old and install the new one?
So the question is there a plan to install right from within the app versus uninstalling or downloading SSMS.exe and then running that? How many people would love to see that happen? Great news, it's going to happen in SSMS 21. So if you haven't read any of the blog posts, the third one, which I'll link to at the end, has the roadmap for SSMS. And in there, we call out that there will be a new installer. So the vision here is that you have the installer, you install SSMS once, and then any upgrades occur within the application.
Great.
Yay? Yay? Yay. Yay. Great.
The second question is asking, can the server grouping be put under source control and shared between teammates to have a default list of connections?
That's an interesting concept. So the question was, can the registered servers, can that be source controlled so that we could share it?
It's not yet planned, but that is feedback that we've heard before, and I like the idea.
Drew loves source control for anyone who doesn't know that. And if you ever want to talk about source control, Drew is your person for sure. I'm going to jump ahead and mention that in SSMS 21, we're also making changes to the connection dialog. So I mentioned that we've made a couple so far, right? This is where I told you it might get chaotic, right? I warned you.
It's not chaotic yet.
Not yet. It could be. So when we introduced this connection dialog for SSMS 20, one of the very first questions that I was asked is, why didn't you move this to the front? Connect to database. That was question number 1. Question 2 was, it'd be really nice if application intent was more visible because right now we have to type that in. And this person says, yes, we would love to see that. Daniel's like, bring that. So SSMS 21, the connection dialog, this one, it's not really being updated. We're doing an overhaul. So we've already been talking with designers to say, how do we make this, one, not just more modern, but that we're taking the feedback that we've gotten from the community and we're making this connection dialog host the information, the properties that you're changing most often on the front screen. So we'll look to bring, and we didn't move database as an aside, in SSMS 20 because there ended up being a lot of risk. We tried. I asked them if they could do that, and they tried, but we really needed to scope this release. So that will come in SSMS 21. The application intent read-only will come in SSMS 21. We'll add a connection string in the dialog in SSMS 21, and we will also introduce the ability to save your connections like you would see in Azure Data Studio in SSMS 21. So big overhaul. If there's other things that you're looking for, let us know. On terms of a source control or maybe the ability to
Share, collaborate, yeah. Not yet. It's very nice of you to give people such a heads up that you're about to move their cheese.
yeah, I'm giving you a lot of heads up that this is going to happen. Yes, question. Can we go to the back? Who wants to run? Who's going to get a workout?
64-bit.
Okay, I kind of wondered if I should just put everything related to SSMS 21 in the front. And now you're making me think I really should have, because that's sort of at the end, but yes, 64-bit. So part of SSMS 21 also means we're going to upgrade to the Visual Studio 2022 shell. We're on an older version of the shell. Those of you that use Visual Studio may notice some differences, right, when you look at the US. So going to the VS 2022 shell means that we also get to 64-bit. So yes, we will do that. And that, there's another question in the back, so if you can keep your hand raised while he runs. Understand that that's a significant amount of work for us to do that. So I'm gonna ask right now for a little bit of patience in terms of the time between now and when you see a preview for SSMS 21, because the engineers did a lot of work in a very short amount of time to get SSMS 20 out, and I'm ridiculously proud of the work that they did. Now they're turning around and they're going to do everything for SSMS 21, and this lift to the shell is a lot. So we'll do our best to get you something as quickly as we can for a preview, and we absolutely will have a preview, likely multiple previews. But if you're not seeing something, understand that it's the lift that has to happen here. There was the question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any plans to bring Copilot in SSMS?
Again, should have started with 21. So for SSMS 21, we will also be investigating what options for Copilot look like. So if anybody attended Joe and Bob's session, which was right after the keynote, Joe kind of mentioned that, and then he's like, I don't want to steal your thunder, but we will absolutely be looking at that. But here, was anybody in that session as an aside? Okay, one of the things that you heard Bob say, and I'm going to repeat it for those who were not in the session. One of the things that you heard Bob say was, we're going to want your feedback, right? If you're interested in previewing this functionality, whether it's in Azure SQL Copilot or whether we're talking about SSMS Copilot, we need your feedback. And what I specifically am looking for is not just, I want to see Copilot in SSMS. What I want to know is, what do you want it to do? Right? You've seen help it complete what you're typing, right? And you've seen the NL to SQL that Buck and I walked through earlier. I'm more thinking about that sidecar experience, which was part of this morning's keynote demo, right? Where I was asking it questions about performance, et cetera. What do you want to see there? What do you want it to help you with? So my constructive request is not just, I want Copilot in SSMS, but I would like Copilot to help me do this in SSMS. I really would love targeted feedback about that so that we can create what's valuable. Otherwise, I'm guessing. I'm just throwing darts and hoping that I get close, and I do not want to do that.
So in addition to Saturday morning at 10:10 a.m. in the Meet the Experts Lounge, folks can find you in the booth when?
I will be in the booth this afternoon. I'm not sure what time. I have to check my calendar. 3, maybe 2. I'm not 100% sure. I will be in the booth this afternoon. I will be in the booth tomorrow. I'll be available after the session if we want to talk more. They Ask the Experts on Saturday, as Drew mentioned, and then you can always send me an email as well. All right. We will keep going. Oh, where's my slide? There we go. Okay. Object Explorer. I know that people spend probably the most time in Object Explorer and Query Editor. So I've got a few things for Object Explorer and then a lot more for Query Editor. With Object Explorer, you have the ability to save yourself some typing time by dragging the table name and individual columns from OE over to the editor. So for those of you that haven't seen that before, and let me pin this open and let me close registered servers because I don't need this, and adjust my size here. So when I'm looking at, let's say my wide world importers database and I expand tables and I don't need any of this. So I can go ahead and just take my columns and I can drag those over here, right? Very easy. Saves me a ton of typing when I need to pull all of those over at one time. The details pane. Now this was something that I never ever used. When I spent my time in SSMS, I wrote a lot of T-SQL and I would look in OE, but I didn't spend a ton of time like exploring in more detail. So if you do F7, oh, what is it on my keyboard? It's gonna be function F7. Hold on. Control F7. Nope. Nope. Hold on. There we go. Sorry. On my laptop. It is function F7 on my laptop. So this gives me additional information about the table or the object, which I had no idea even existed. So if you want to go in there, feel free. Also, while we're here, a lot of you probably like to right-click and then do your scripting options, right? Script the table out as a create, script an insert, etc. Did you know that if you expand your indexes and you highlight all of them, you can right-click and you can script all of them at once. This was something that I learned. I used to script them all one at a time, which is really, really painful. But you can F7 in here, expand that, and script them all out in one fell swoop. Question? I'm sorry?
You can do that by default on your tools options.
I need you to talk a little bit louder. I'm so sorry.
You can do that. You can do that on your tools option preferences to script indexes.
To script all of them at once?
Yep.
So if we go to Tools, Options, and then I'm going to Object Explorer down here and Scripting, you're telling me that somewhere in here there's an option to script all of my indexes at once? I don't know where that is, but I totally believe you. Script indexes here, you mean change it to true? Okay. See, I knew. I think I put it even in the abstract that we would probably learn some things that are new. Thank you. As another note while we're in here, did you know that you can change other properties? For example, we used to get a lot of feedback that we didn't include the compression settings, and we changed that in one release because we were getting feedback about that. So that now defaults to true. But depending upon what you like to have scripted out or not, come on in here and you can change any of these options. So as a statistics person, I would love to script out my stats as well. Thank you. Learned something new. Look at, I was ahead of myself. My right-click options, control that, script multiple at once. Went through all of that. Filtering. Within Object Explorer, I can right-click and I can choose how I want to filter the objects in my database. So this happens for folks, particularly when they have a lot of objects within the database. Why can't I find my filter at this moment? Is it
You're
back
on
up
the
here?
database instead of the folder.
There we go. Sorry. So we go into filter settings. What do I want to filter on within here? If I want to filter on wide, I can say OK, and then I'm just going to see the databases that have that in there. Right? So I have multiple options in terms of reducing that result set. Before you ask, there's been a request to have the ability to group by schema within Management Studio. So for those of you that leverage schemas and then have lots of objects, right? You don't love scrolling through that list. I'm not promising anything. I hear that feedback. We do have that in Azure Data Studio for those of you that like using Azure Data Studio. So I'm not ruling it out, but I'm also not promising it. I've heard this feedback for sure. We've also gotten feedback about a true search capability, right? That's something that folks have asked for as well. Again, no promises there. Absolutely am aware of that feedback. I've talked to one of our engineers about possibly what we could do there. There's priorities, right? There's certain things that we absolutely have to knock out first, and then it's a matter of what can we do after that. On that note, I've talked about the big things that we're doing for SSMS 21, and once we get through the big things, then there's little things that we would hope to do. So we have a feedback site. How many of you have ever been to the feedback site?
Not enough.
Not enough. Now, I'm going to be really honest in that sometimes I have some challenges with the feedback site. But let me talk about this for a second. This is the feedback site. It's feedback.azure.com. Assad mentioned this morning also in the keynote. So you'll notice one of the favorite things that people request is the debugger. I'll come back to that later, I promise. In terms of discussing it. But you can filter by area, and everything for SSMS should be under tooling. So when you select this, it's going to reduce that down to just what we have in tooling. And you can sort, by default, it comes with most votes, but then we can see newest. I go in here on a fairly regular basis. This was 12 hours ago. I haven't seen that one. I honestly probably haven't seen these for about a week. But you'll notice that we pay attention to what you all post here on a regular basis. A challenge is that sometimes I ask for more information, like I have here, right? I was like, can you help me understand this a little bit more? And then there's no way to tag you, right? There's nowhere to be like, hey, I don't understand. I'm not able to recreate this problem. So I have 2 requests. First request is if you file a bug here, right? If you've run into a problem, 1, make sure that it repos in the latest SSMS, because we would fix it in the latest SSMS. We wouldn't port it back to an 18.x version, right? So make sure it still occurs in 20. And if it does, please provide steps to recreate, because that is extremely helpful to me. Because I go in and I read these and I recreate, and then I log an item for the engineers, right? So that's my first request. My second request is that before you do anything, you look to see if it's already there. Now, I know this can be tricky, right? This can take a little bit in terms of the searching. So first restrict it to tooling, and then come in here and say, maybe like group by schema kind of thing, right? And see what you get. So, oh, look, we already had a bunch of that, and I put it all together. So look for something before you create it new. Then my third item, which I'm adding on here, is that when you see something that you would like to have, I need you to upvote it. Because the little things that come after the big things are based upon votes and comments. That is our currency. That's how I know what folks want to see. If you reply on a blog post, I want to see this. You're going to see me reply, that's great, thank you. Please go enter a feedback item. If you send me an email and you say, hey, I want to see this, I'm going to say, that's great feedback, thank you. Can you please go post a feedback item? If you talk to me here, I will probably say, that is excellent feedback, and I will write it down. I will write it down, but then I will also say, that's great, can you please go post a feedback item? Because I need the broader community. I need all of the millions of SSMS users to see what we could do and to vote, right? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, so we have a few online questions if you're good with that.
A few. That sounds interesting.
Yes. So first one, are there any plans to allow tabs to be aligned vertically, such as can be done in Edge, and maybe reopen tabs like in browser sessions or Azure Data Studio?
So if I understand the question, when you're in the query editor, rather than having my top tabs across the top, you want to have the tabs down the side. That's a great idea. Has anybody ever asked for that? I don't know that anybody's, okay. Drew says yes, folks have asked for that. So my request would be, let's see if there's a feedback item for that. If not, please add it. If there is, then please upvote it and add a comment.
aka.ms/SQL feedback.
There we go. So I don't have that planned, but that's really good feedback. And then in terms of the reopening, I know that request is out there. It's possible that I consolidated those all into one, but same thing there. Go ahead and please upvote that.
Great. Follow-up question on that.
Yep.
Will it be possible to have 2 query windows open side by side like Edge does?
So you can have 2 query windows open side by side like Edge does, but let me just make sure that this is what the person is requesting. So let me close this. This is actually something that I was going to show. So let's say that I had this open and I typed something in here. I can go up to the top and I can say new vertical tab group, and I can have those side by side. That's one of my favorite things. Did folks know you could do that? Okay, some folks did. If that doesn't answer the question, let me know. I know you have a question in the back. Hold tight. Please don't forget. One of the other things, since I'm here, is have you ever had a scenario where you've got a stored procedure, and I'm going to expand this out here just because I'm sitting in here at the moment, so hold tight if there's another question. And let's just say that I script out whatever this stored procedure is. I create it out to a new window. I don't need this window anymore, so for the moment I'm going to close it. And you know how you end up scrolling, and sometimes you forget what your parameters are at the top here? You have this little friend over here, which I need to thank my friend Jess for reminding me about this or telling me about this. You can do this and like do a split screen. So in the top half, you can see what you've got going on recently. And then in the bottom half, you're going through the rest of it. And then to make it go away when you're done, you just take this and you should go all the way back up. Cool.
All right. Third question.
Yep.
I did say there were a few.
Yep.
Would it be possible to connect KQL database via SSMS or Azure Data Studio?
So there has been interest in connecting to other databases outside of SQL, so KQL, Postgres, MySQL, et cetera. That's not something that is currently available. It's not something that we have on the shorter term roadmap. We've heard that request. It may be something that we could do down the road. That is something currently available with Azure Data Studio, for sure.
Okay. Are there plans to make filtering for multiple terms possible, e.g. multiple schema names?
Are there plans to make filtering for multiple entities possible, like multiple schema names? I don't have that on the roadmap. Is there a request out there for a feedback item for it? If not, create one. If there is, please upvote it.
And the last of the questions that we have from the online crew.
Yep. Thank you, online crew.
My personal favorite, will there be dark mode in 21?
Will there be dark mode? I will come back to that question. There's another question in the back while we hold that one, if that's okay. So the dark mode, my goodness, I was just like the Facebook. I sounded so boomer. Sorry. Dark mode debugger, I will come back to when I have 5 minutes left. Who had a question in the back? It's 10 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah. So is it possible to show two result sets when working in the side-by-side panel?
Ooh, is it possible to show two result sets? I don't think so. You mean, you mean from here when I did this split?
Yes.
It should. But let's test it. I always like doing this. Oh, well, I have mine set up a little bit differently in that it flips the pane, just because that's the way that it works well for demos. But yes? Is that what you're asking for? Yeah, okay, perfect. I thought you meant like, I've had another request of query and have an old result set and a new result set. That's not possible. Okay, here's the irony. I have like 10 slides for this, and I have less than 10 minutes. So we're not gonna get to this, and it's totally fine. I'm not even gonna jump into it because I'm not gonna get through it, and if we have a little bit of time at the end, I'm gonna come back to it. So what we're gonna do instead is we're gonna come in here, and we will go to here. And why am I'm so struggling today. So struggling today. So I've gone through some of these things for 21 already. New installer updates, Copilot investigation, and I have a blog post that talks about the roadmap. Within that blog post that talks about the roadmap, we talk about what's not on the roadmap. And two things that are currently not on the roadmap, the debugger and dark mode. And let me tell you why before you start to get sad or upset. So the debugger, there's really some limitations related to its use. And I'm happy to sit with anyone who wants to show me how they use the debugger to make sure that I understand what folks want to do. But we removed that back in the 18.0 release, which was in 2019. So we took it away 5 years ago, and folks have been unhappy ever since, which we understand. But in order to use the debugger, you need to have SA privileges, and you need to have DCOM open. And in a modern environment, in a cloud environment, in an Azure SQL VM, in managed instance, in Azure SQL database, DCOM is not an option. And how many people do you really want to have SA? Not a lot, right? Maybe you, but not a lot. So we made the decision to remove it. And in order for us to give a debugger akin to what you know from then, there has to be work done engine side to make that possible. So it's not us saying yes or no, right? There's work that would have to happen in order for that to be available. But when that decision was made, we did work with teams internally to ensure that the debugger is available in the community version of Visual Studio. So it does exist there. And some of you might be like, that's not enough. I hear you. I've heard that a lot. Again, I'm happy to sit down and have you show me how you use the debugger. Okay? I'm more than willing to do that. Second, dark mode.
Don't you mean the dark mode?
I know. So showed my age there. So, did you know that you can have a dark mode of
Wow,
sorts?
that looks good.
Within SSMS right now? There's many blog posts that talk about how to do that, how to get this configuration. I don't have any of them linked because none of them are Microsoft posts. But if you search SSMS dark mode how to or something like that, you'll find it. That's what I did. But here's the thing. Even though SSMS is built on the Visual Studio shell, all we've pulled is the editor and the toolbar at the top and the menu items. This one isn't showing. I've got another scenario where it shows better. But that's it. Every other window, every other dialogue that you see in SSMS is not from Visual Studio. It's created by the SSMS team. So in order for us to implement dark mode, we have to go and touch every single one of those windows. And that's every create, every drop, every database tuning advisor, profiler, the AG dashboard, all of that would have to be touched. And how many of you are sitting there thinking, okay, but you're Microsoft. You've got lots of engineers. You can do that, right? You are thinking that. I know. I get that. I really do. But there's a finite number of engineers that we have, and they're fantastic, but they can't do everything, right? I know some of them that would, if we asked them to, would just work themselves nonstop. But I don't want them to do that. And we have to prioritize. The short thing is we have to prioritize. So if we were to do dark mode, what would you not want us to do? Would you not want us to update the shell? Would you not want us to redo the connection dialog? Would you not want us to update the installer? Would you not want us to investigate Copilot? Right? Those are the kinds of trade-offs, and this is what's really difficult as a PM, that we have to think about and make. And I absolutely understand why dark mode is of interest and of value, right? It's not just this is a nice to have. For some folks with visual impairments and who run dark mode everywhere else, I get that. I hear that, and I understand that. But it's a balancing act for what we would love to do, which would be all of it, and then what we actually can do. So the SSMS 21 roadmap that I listed in the slide is what we are absolutely going to do. And beyond that is it to be determined. But I have asked engineering to understand the effort that it would take for us to do a dark mode. So we commit to understanding what that effort is, but nothing else. Okay. So on that note, where I tell you no, I will throw up the feedback slide because we are pretty much out of time. And you can go to the link, you can click on the QR code. I want to hear your feedback about SSMS. That wouldn't be the place for feedback about SSMS, right? I will see that eventually, but I'd rather have you talk to us, or I'd rather have you go to the feedback site. This is, how was the session? How did we do? Did it align with what you saw in the abstract? I know we didn't have enough time to go through everything. I apologize. I knew that was going to be a tricky part of having 50 minutes. So we can always do better. Please leave feedback. And then if you do leave feedback, there's a charity involved with feedback that you leave. Every time you submit a feedback, there's a donation made to a charity from the SQL Bits team. So I would encourage you to do that as well. We will be up here if you have questions. I think it's lunchtime, but we'll be here. And thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, folks.